Welcome to the 1000 Hours Outside podcast. I love saying that because it means I'm going to talk to someone I really love. And today it's Greta. Greta, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
This is
so
awesome.
Excited. Yeah,
We've met in person.
Glad.
So this is Greta Eskridge. You may know her on Instagram as Ma and Pa Modern. We can talk about that a little bit too. It's a fun name. Greta Eskridge wrote the book Adventuring Together: How to Create Connections and Make Lasting Memories with Your Kids. It's fantastic. I read it this past week. We're going to be talking a lot about adventuring together. And then she also has another book coming out next spring. So Greta, welcome. Can you take just a couple minutes and tell us about you? Tell us about your family.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm Greta, and I'm a second generation homeschool mom. That means I was homeschooled a long time ago. And
I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah.
I did not know that. That's neat. That's really unique.
Yeah, it's fun. There were a lot less of us back in the olden days.
Yeah.
My parents were pioneers.
Yeah.
But I loved being homeschooled so much that I always planned to homeschool my own kids. And I'm going to tell you a funny story, and we're going to get sidetracked already.
That's fine. Yep.
When I started dating my husband, like we weren't even dating, like we were hanging out. And I told him I was 18, and I said, hey, when I have kids, I plan to homeschool. So if you're like not okay with homeschooling, we probably shouldn't hang out anymore.
Like right from the get-go.
That's it. This is it.
These are my expectations.
This is really important to me. So clearly I loved homeschooling because I wanted to homeschool my own kids.
Yeah.
And in between being homeschooled myself and homeschooling my kids, I taught public high school for 5 years. I was an English teacher, and I loved that as well. It was a lot of fun. But when my first baby was born, I knew the time that I would have with him is short. And it's true. He's almost 18 now. It has flown by. Wow. And I just decided, that's it. We're going to start homeschooling now. So all of my kids have been home with me the whole time. We have 4, 17, 15, 13, and 10. And one of my favorite parts of being a homeschool mom is that I get to spend a lot of time outside the 4 walls of our home and adventuring and just exploring and learning. I always say that the world is our classroom.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
We have some similar things. I taught in the public school for 5 years. I taught high school math.
Oh, wow.
And I loved it.
You're a brainiac.
I loved it. I am not at all, but I did. I love the kids. It's so fun.
Yeah, me too.
And your book is interesting because your book doesn't talk about homeschooling at all, which is actually like, it's for anyone, right? Yeah, and our audience is kind of a mix of people that are in different stages. So I didn't know. I didn't know that you were second generation homeschooler. That's so neat. And
well, I wanted the book to be for anybody. I feel like the message of connecting with your kids, however you choose to do it, for us, we love to connect through having adventures and especially being outside a lot. That's applicable to all of us. Every parent wants that. Every parent needs that. Every family needs that. So I tried really hard to provide ways and ideas and inspiration for all kinds of families to be able to.
You really did. That. I mean, the book is fantastic, and each chapter ends with like a whole list of ideas of different type of topics. So I really love that it included practical things. Okay, can we start with? I want to start with a certain topic from the book because it's kind of like we met at the Wild and Free conference just this past fall. And that's with Wild and Free. That's a homeschooling group, but similar. It's just moms that really want to slow down, and hopefully I'm not butchering this. They just want to have, have their life with their kids. So anyway, last minute I got asked to speak at the conference, and I was nervous. I'm nervous about everything. So like totally nervous. and it was
You're
completely
phenomenal.
new, and you're really sweet. But you just feel like I don't really know. And so, we brought our whole family down to Tennessee, to Franklin, and we were stretched. But all of these blessings come out of being stretched and sort of
Yeah.
stepping out of your comfort zone. So one of the topics you talk about in your book quite a bit is being stretched,
Mm,
and that stretching isn't easy, and adventures change us.
mm,
You say they take us out of our routines, our homes, our neighborhoods, our people, and make us grow. They push us into uncomfortable places, and we're offering a great gift to our kids because out of that discomfort comes all kinds of valuable learning about themselves and the world around them.
mm.
So, do you want to tell us a story? Do you want to just talk about some ways that your family has been stretched and sort of the growth and the blessings that you've seen come out of that?
Yeah, it's so fun to have someone read my book to me because, like, sometimes I forget what's in there.
Sure.
And then you read it to me, and I was like, oh, that brings back a lot of good memories. And just reminds me, like, yeah, I really do believe that. I didn't just put it
Hmm.
in the book because it sounds good. Like, I really do
Yeah.
believe that because I think for a lot of families, we don't we have a lot of luxury, like a lot of
Mm.
freedom to live a comfortable life, right? And
Yeah.
that's a gift that a lot of us are able to enjoy. And along with that, though, comes the ability to get pretty comfortable and to be settled into routines and to do things the easy way. And doing things the easy way feels good sometimes. Well, a lot of times, actually. Let's be honest. Uh, but we all need to be pushed and to be pushed outside of our comfort zone because I really believe that's where the best growth happens. Um, and so, for my family, we live in suburbia. We don't, have farm animals that we have to take care of. My kids are not walking through the snow to catch the school bus. Like, their life is pretty comfortable. And so I've thought, well, how can I help them experience a little discomfort? How can I help them
Mm.
be pushed so they can grow? And for us, that's come through a lot of outdoor adventures, like things like hiking and camping, because you're stripped of those comforts that make life easy. Whether it's pushing yourself physically because you're going on a hike that's making you tired and hot and weary and thirsty,
Yeah.
grumpy, or you're camping in the rain and there's mud and it's cold and you just want to go home. And so for years, what we've said as a family is this kind of slogan: it'll make a great story later. And we try to have that mentality. We're in the middle of something that's uncomfortable and we kind of wish it was over, and we'll say, it'll make a great story later, and try to use that to help change our hearts, right? And
Mm.
push through. And saying that for years, I always wondered, are my kids really listening? So here's the story that you asked for.
I love stories.
A few years ago, my two older boys went on a camping trip without the family. They went with Boy Scouts. They're very involved in their scouting troop. And they were camping on an island a couple hours away from home. We live in Southern California, so they had to take a boat to this island. It's the middle of September. We have great hot weather in September here. It's not stormy, but out of nowhere, a storm came up. And my boys had not packed their rain gear because we checked the weather. There was no storms in sight, and they were not being good Boy Scouts. They were not prepared with their rain gear. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they're backpacking. So they had all their stuff in their backpack. Their backpacks are going to be soaked, and they're going to be soaked. So they're hiking from the boat across the island to their campsite. It's going to be miserable. There's nothing worse than camping when everything's wet, you're muddy. And I just kind of felt bummed out, and like my mother heart wanted to protect them, even though I say like discomfort is good. Like, there's that
Yeah.
battle we have as moms.
Yeah.
So anyways, they come home at the end of the weekend, and I say, they're all muddy, and I'm like, how was it? Were you cold? Were you wet? Was it awful? And they both looked at me and they said, it was awesome. I was like, what?
Wow.
And they said it was so
Wow.
awesome. Like, the rain came, like even when we were on the ship going over and the boat was tossing. And my 15-year-old, who's a crack up, he goes, Mom, it was like when I had to pee, I was standing in the bathroom and I'm trying to pee and the boat was rocking. He was all, it was like I was standing on Star Tours at Disneyland and I couldn't like aim. I was just cracking up because
Like he'll
how
remember that forever.
you will. And they
Yeah.
said, they're like, as we were doing it, Mom, like we were muddy and kind of uncomfortable and getting a little irritated. But we took the trash bags that you sent for our wet towels. We made ponchos out of those. And we said, it'll make a great story later. And I was just like, hey, they're listening. They
Yeah.
know
You
that the
modeled it.
discomfort lasts
Yeah.
forever. And it's worth it. It's really worth it.
Yeah. I love this topic because nobody really talks about this. I agree with you when you said for the most part, I think we try and like as a society, we try and keep our kids really comfortable. This is a
Mhm.
society, right? That everyone gets a medal. Even I heard in it was one of the screen documentaries where they talk about how like kids can just turn to their phone. They
Yes,
always have something to turn to. So
totally.
no one is
Yes.
working through these
Oh my God,
uncomfortable, I guess
totally.
would be the word, uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
And even I don't know if you know Linda McGurk, she talks about there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad
Mhm.
clothing.
Oh yeah, I
And so
love her
she
book.
was saying, that this is that when kids are uncomfortable
Yeah.
physically or in any sort of way, this is helping them develop grit and
Yes,
resilience. And
I know.
so to hear you say you want to push your kids into
Mhm.
discomfort, I don't hear anybody saying that, you
Well,
know.
I
But
don't,
it's
I mean,
good. I mean, it's
it's
so right on because life
it's
is not
hard.
easy. And so they
Yeah.
have to have this skill set to be able to work through. And we can teach them that just through
Yeah.
outdoor adventure, which has a whole bunch of, or indoor adventure, something
Yeah.
new. It just
Yeah.
has a whole bunch of other benefits as well.
Yeah. I think too, like I mean, not every parent is this way, but I personally struggled, especially as a younger mom or a new mom with younger kids, like wanting to control everything. And if I did everything right, then they were going to sleep through the night. They were going to eat whatever I told them to. They were going to be behaved. All the boxes would be checked. And then I would feel like I was doing a good job. But what I realized was that wasn't always good for me. It wasn't always good for them. And it certainly wasn't the truth because it was taking out the reality that our kids are individuals
Yeah.
and I can't control everything to make them always do to get the certain outcome.
Mhm.
And instead, what I realized I wanted for me and for them was to create people who were able to be flexible
Mhm.
because being able to bend when the wind blows instead of
Yes.
break is a really important skill to develop, not just when you're a little kid, but through the rest of your life. Like to be a flexible person, to be able to be traveling and things go wrong, and you're like, you know what? We'll figure it out. It's all going to be okay. We missed our flight,
Mhm.
but there's always another flight. Like to be able to not have every a misadventure turn you into to create a tailspin and you lose it. Like
Yeah.
I want um, to raise kids who are resilient and who can look at misadventure and say it'll make a great story later, and how can I bend right now, how can I bend when the wind blows instead of
Yeah.
being blown over. And it's hard for me. I see the that lack in my life that that I tend to not want to be flexible. I tend to not want to pursue grit. I tend to want to take
Mhm.
the easy way out. And so I know I need to work on that in my own life. And I want to help my kids work on that now. So hopefully by the time they're adults, they're in a better spot than I am.
Mhm. I think that topic of modeling comes up a lot in your book. So you talk about, like you talk about doing it for yourself. You say it's important for us too. We all want our kids to
Mhm.
grow, to be exposed to new ideas, meet new people, and have new experiences. We expect that as a normal and natural part of childhood. However, as parents, we sometimes forget that this is important for us too. And so you
Yeah.
talk about this. Maybe you can tell a little about it. You took a surprise camping trip with your kids without your husband, and you said in there, when they say, where are we going, where are we going, and you say, I've never been, where are we, and so you're actually doing it for yourself and for them, and you're modeling. So that seemed like a really fun idea. Do you know which story I'm talking about,
Yeah,
where
I
you told the
do.
kids, pack your bags?
Yeah.
Can you want to talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah, it was good. It pushed me outside of my comfort zone because I was going somewhere. It was only a few hours from home, but it was someplace I had never been. And I knew I was going to lose cell service. Like there's an element of comfort that comes when you have your cell phone on. You're like,
Hmm.
well, if I get lost, I've got my maps. Google Maps can take me out. I can call somebody to come rescue me if we get a
Yeah.
flat tire. But I knew like I was going to reach a point where we would be out in the boonies and lose cell service. So I printed maps up ahead and made sure I knew how to read them. And I surprised the kids, which
Cool.
was really fun. And we were just driving. We drove over a mountain pass, and they're like, "Okay, can you tell us now?" I'm like, "Well, I really don't know where we're going. I've never been here before. I have pictures. That's it." And we pulled off the road finally, and are just driving down this dirt road, and in the distance the kids saw like a canvas like teepee, and they're like, "Are you kidding? We're
Aw.
staying there." I'm like, "Yes, we are." And,
Yeah.
it was just us out literally in the middle of nowhere. There was one house, and we walked down to the house to like check in because that was the owner of the teepee. And his house was amazing. We got to talk to him. He built it out of like homemade adobe bricks, and met his dogs.
Wow.
And all night long, it was just me and the four kids, um, listening to coyotes howl and saw the stars. And it was beautiful. And it was a big adventure for all of us.
Yeah. And you're so glad you did it. And
Totally.
it was
Yeah.
and it was stretching you. You have a quote in your book from Frederick Douglass that says, um, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress."
Yeah.
So I got a lot out of your book, from this concept of just being stretched and celebrating being stretched and
Yeah.
looking for opportunities to sort of break out of your normal routine. We had when my kids were little, my husband traveled a lot for work, and so I had a time. It's interesting that you call it misadventure. I think it's just kind of like it's like that concept like you talk about. There's so many layers and variables to life, you just can't control it.
Yeah.
So you go on this adventure and you think it's going to look one way, and then, I think a lot of times it looks different,
Yeah.
and that's part of the learning. But when ours were little, I had like a 3-month old. I think they would have been like 2, 1, and 3 months. Right. And I took them
Yeah.
camping.
Oh
My
my
husband was out of
gosh.
town, and my in-laws were staying at a campground. In Michigan, Michigan has beautiful campgrounds. It was a couple hours away, and so they stayed at the campground, and then maybe a mile away there was like these barracks. It was like a group camp or something
Mm.
where you could for pretty cheap rent, like where there'd be 20 kids, like a youth camp
Right.
or something, right?
Yeah.
And there was just all these bunk beds. So I'm like, well, I can do that. I don't have to set up a tent. I just
Yeah.
have to bring stuff for the bedding. So I packed up, got all these little ones, right? Drove there. We stopped at Big Boy on the way. I mean, you have these little memories.
Yeah.
Like I'd never taken them out to eat, and it was fun. And we stopped at a restaurant. And anyway, so we get there. I unpack it all by myself. I've got these little ones. They're running around. I got the baby, and we were supposed to stay, I don't know, for the week. Well, in the middle of the night, the 3-month old gets that croup cough, you
Oh
know,
gosh.
just all of a sudden barking, that cough. So I had to call my in-laws to drive the mile over, sleep in the bunk beds with my other kids, and then I spent the entire night in the shower, like
Oh.
pressing the button, in the campground shower to get that steam, right? And
Oh
then
my
and then the morning
gosh.
came and we packed up and headed home. But I don't regret that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't regret it. It was
No.
great. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't what we expected, but I'm so glad we did it, and then
Yeah.
I did it more often, like we did other ones. And
Yeah.
you talk about that in your book. You talk about you start small
Yes.
and then you're able to build off that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
It's really true
Yeah.
for them and for us. Like I think that
Yes.
that's like they realize, oh, I can do it. I
Yeah.
can do this thing that I didn't think I could. And we realize, oh, okay, I can do it, and
Yes.
like that's the thing, like to be experiencing that together, because there's so much in parenthood that I think we're like saying, hey, you can do this because we have the benefit of we're adults, like it's not a big deal for us, and we forget sometimes that
Yeah.
um it is a big deal for them because
Yeah.
they've never done it. They're not 40, they're
Right.
4. And so we lack a little bit of empathy, and that's one of my favorite things about adventuring with my kids, is because it puts us on a level playing field. Even though I'm 40 and I have the benefit of more years of experience, in the moment, those moments when the campground is a mess and there's mud everywhere, or you're on a trail and it's hot and you don't have much water and you're like, are we going to make
I
dying
like.
of thirst?
Mhm.
You're the playing field is level, right?
Yeah.
You're just experiencing it together, and that's where the connection grows, because you are walking through a hard thing together, and that is creates such a beautiful bond.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that I have written down here is just what is adventuring together? So you say adventuring together simply means getting outside the confines of your regular routine. You talk about how your dad's gift to you was taking humblest of moments and turning them into a grand adventure. You say, my adventure credentials aren't that amazing. So I love this about you. Like this is not taking your kids hiking down into the Grand Canyon. Although
No,
I think eventually you can get to that.
I
But
hope
this is
so.
about these are about smaller trips, like you say,
Yeah.
outside of your routine. You have a weekly adventure group that gets together over and over again. So, what counts as an adventure?
Well, I think that you start wherever you are. So, when I started adventuring with my kids, we went to a nature center and walked on a marked trail for less than a mile. And it was an amazing adventure because we were just getting started. So wherever you're at, it might be reading books together. Like I have a whole chapter on adventuring through books, because when I was growing up, I adventured a lot outside and did more adventurous things with my dad. But my mom loves being inside, having tea, gardening.
Hmm.
She's not a go outside and go on a big adventure person, but we read books together. And that was how we adventured. She also has some physical limitations, so she wasn't taking us hiking. We were adventuring through books. So there's lots of different ways you could adventure. It's you start wherever you're at, and
Yeah.
that's where you grow from.
Yeah. I love that you talk about you can adventure through books, and you have a whole chapter in here near the end of the book about indoor adventures, about museums, about adventuring through books, and you have book lists, and you talk about even adventuring together to learn new things like calligraphy or learning to play the ukulele, that all of these things count. They stretch us, and we look back and we feel like they're worth it. And they're ways to make connections.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think learning things together is a wonderful way to adventure. A couple of years ago, my one of my sons and I joined a gym together because he was preparing for a really big hiking trip, and that was an adventure. Working out together every morning. So there's just so many different ways to do it. I think popular culture has sort of conditioned us to believe that an adventure means like your kids are strapping on helmets and ice picks and
They're
you're
zip
like,
lining through the
yeah,
jungle.
you're climbing a glacier
Yeah.
in Iceland, but that's not the reality for most of us. And we need to remember that there are all different kinds of adventure and they all
Yeah.
count.
They do. You have some really cool things I wrote down in here from your book. You say you don't wait for the real adventure.
Mhm.
Small adventures count. Small adventures matter. Small adventures bring joy. Small adventures are stepping stones to bigger ones. That's been our experience too.
Yeah.
I mean, and even when we go to the same places over and over
Yes.
again, there's something new. Like we went apple picking. We're in Michigan, so there's apple orchards every fall. I mean, we've gone 60 times, 75 times. I don't know. We've gone a ton. You go to all the different ones, once the fall hits. And the last time that we went this year, we saw a mouse a mom mouse with all her little babies hanging on underneath, and she was running through the grass, and so, that's an adventure. It's something new.
Yeah.
Um, so I really love that your book promotes and celebrates. It doesn't have to be some big thing. I love that you said this elevates your day-to-day life a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a mom, that for me was really the turning point when I realized that I needed to pursue adventuring with my kids. Was I had three, like 4 and under, and I was home every day, and I was really getting trapped in that, like that control. Like if I do everything just so, everything will turn out just so, and I was getting frustrated when it wasn't. And I sometimes would feel like the walls were closing in. Like this is
Mm,
all I'm doing. Like, you know, blocks, stories, sweep up the crumbs, make sure they do nap time at the right time, and and I needed to get away from that like routine and that to-do list, and
yeah.
really just look into my kids' eyes and to really enjoy being with them and to really have fun with them. And
Mhm.
for me, that meant going away from home and outside of that regular routine and say, it's okay if we miss nap time today. It's okay if um, it's not the regular schedule, and instead just step outside and have fun and
And it,
adventure.
yeah, and it does elevate your life. And even
It
if it's
does.
just a little bit,
Yeah.
it's that change. I really relate to that. You talk about the bickering would stop. So for moms that are in those years, those are hard years.
Yeah.
Those are really hard years. I think around 8 is when it changes. Like around 8, they understand what day of the week it is, and they get it. Maybe
Yeah.
they can fry an egg, or
Yeah.
something. I mean, but up until then, that lasted longer for me than I was expecting.
Mm,
I thought by 3 or 4,
mm.
but it lasts a while where, it's just that there's that day-to-day grind.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
now I can say we're going camping or we're going on a, hiking trip, and I just like get ready, and everybody knows what to pack. They know what to do.
yeah.
Like I don't have to do anything, but that took years of practice, so that now with teenagers and a 10-year-old, like I can just say, let's do this, and we
Yeah.
can. And
Yeah,
that's
and
fun.
yes, and you're glad though for those early
Yeah,
times because
totally.
like we just got out of the fall here in Michigan, and there's all these really fun little places to go in the fall, and big haystacks and the kids run, and I'm watching this sort of transition of like, oh, they don't really like this anymore.
Mm.
And we're growing out of these different things, and it's a little tricky because I still have a little one.
Yes,
So
totally.
we're trying to balance that, but I'm watching them grow out of these places that used to be so delightful, and it's sad,
Yeah.
but then I'm so glad that I did it when I did it, when it was so hard and we had to pack so many things and everyone cried, and
Totally.
you're just glad that you have those memories. So
Yeah. And
um
I feel like then you've created in your family a culture of adventuring together, a culture of exploring together and enjoying life, so that even when you're transitioning to the next stage, you might not be doing those same kinds of adventures, but you're still, the expectation is, and just the culture is, this is what we do together, so we're going to find new things to do in the fall,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yep.
because that's just what you do and that's who you are as a family. And that's really special because now having teens, people ask me all the time, they're like, well, this is great for little kids, but how do we do it with the teenagers? And it's like, you just keep doing it. You don't stop
Yes.
just because they're
Yes.
teenagers. You
Yeah.
keep doing it. And maybe you need to change. In fact, those teens are probably going to push you a little farther because they're going to be like,
Yes.
hey, we can
Yes,
do more.
actually.
And
Okay. So
that's awesome.
yes, we have done the coolest things. My kids are jumping off these cliffs. I'm like, it's really, really cool to watch. But
Yeah.
we were in North Carolina, has a ton of waterfalls.
Mm.
Or on the other side of the country as you, but all these waterfalls, and so there's this one called Graveyard Fields, which is kind of a a spooky name. I was just
Yeah.
beautiful waterfalls and like all these rocks, and you're trying to like maneuver, and there's a swimming holes, and I don't know, there's so many cool things. So your kids get older, right? You get to go off and do these new things. And
Yeah.
I slipped at one of these places. I slipped. I wouldn't have gotten really hurt, but I probably would have gotten a little. And my daughter grabbed me. She
Oh,
grabbed me. I was like, we're like the tides have turned, you know?
yeah.
So I agree with you, man. It just gets more fun and more
It
fun.
does. It does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's so many cool things to explore.
Yeah.
Uh, I think one of the important things here is that if we're going to adventure with our kids, we have to have time for it. And so you
Right.
talk in your book about time pressures. You
Yeah.
say, we live in a day and age where there are so many things vying for our children's attention and even more for their hearts. There is an endless array of activities to take part in, texts to send, the newest shows to binge watch, there are apps to explore, a societal need to keep up with the fun that friends, acquaintances, and even strangers are having. You talk about this everyday call of technology,
Mm.
and we have to be diligent about carving out consistent time for adventure. Connections aren't created by accident.
Mm.
Um, let's talk about our society and time and the pressures and lessons and what may seem like wasted time maybe actually turns out to
Yeah.
be really valuable. How do you guys schedule your life and your time, and how do you leave space for adventure?
Well, I think it's helped that we decided, like from the very beginning, that we would have a day of our school week that was set aside for adventuring, and that we considered that a learning day, even though there was not like quantifiable data. That my kids don't come home and write a short essay about what they learned on
Yeah.
Adventure Day. There's no tests about what plants they saw on Adventure Day. Um, so there's not like I don't like I said that quantifiable data. Like there's nothing that necessarily shows proof or evidence of what they've learned on that day. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't count. I think that there is a lot of pressure to have evidence to show something, to have something to show for what we've accomplished, and that's just not always the case. And I don't even think it's always necessary. I think that
Mm.
the experiences that happen organically, the learning that happens organically when we're out having an adventure, those things count and they matter, even if we don't have some sort of paperwork to
Yeah.
show for it.
Yeah. John Holt talks about that.
Yes,
He
I
has
love John Holt.
I do too. He talks about how, we're so test heavy that we've forgotten that we can see when kids are learning.
Hmm.
He says you
Yes.
just see it. You just
Yeah.
know. Like, your kids are growing. They grew from that experience. When your daughter catches you because you're slipping down the waterfall,
Yeah.
she has grown from when she was a toddler. And
Yeah.
so that was something that really stuck out to me. And even like that's what we see in nature, right? Like, how do you know the flower is growing? We don't go out there every day with a little ruler, and make a
Yeah.
graph and check off, oh, new leaves, you just
Yeah.
see it. You see
Yeah.
growth. Growth is evident. And so to not have to have pressure of evidence all the time is such a freeing thing.
Yeah. And I think too that just being willing to create your own family culture that is different than the culture around you, to say that we are going to make
Yeah.
spending time together, um, outdoors or exploring or reading a book together, whatever it is,
Mm.
as your source of connection and adventure. Um, that's different than what the world is doing. Like, um, you know, maybe it's choosing to not play a sport every season, taking a season off, or choosing to say, our sport is hiking together or sailing together,
Yeah.
because we can connect better that way. Whatever it is, like being willing to be different and to walk to the beat of your own drum, that's hard to do, but it can be really liberating, and it
Yeah.
has been for our family. It has been very liberating, and I think it has been very connecting for us.
Yeah, and here you have a 17-year-old. So you can see that your child grew. Your
Yes.
child grew with these immeasurable activities, and so it was worth it. I really, we already do a lot together, but I was really drawn into your book, like I want to do a surprise trip, and it can be these small things, but then they're really exciting, and it does become your family culture. John Taylor Gatto, he talks about
So love
the
him.
art the art of building a family, and
Yeah.
and it's like I think we put a lot into building our home.
Hmm.
There's so many home things, right? Like, and I'm not good at decorating. This is like the one spot in my house. Like if you were to see the other side of the camera, it's like totally trashed. And I'm like, I got this one cute little spot. This is it. But there's blogs and magazines and all these things about the art of our aesthetics of our home.
Hmm.
But you're talking about the art of building our family culture.
Yeah. Well, I think even that's a really good example because you can show with pictures and movie, videos and reels, you can show your home being beautifully decorated. But how do you show the growth of
Mm,
your family? Like that's harder to measure in a quantifiable way.
yeah,
And to show it online and to make it appealing. But a freshly
right.
painted room with some new pillows and cute stuff on the wall, you can see that. And so it's
Mhm.
easier and it feels more accessible for a lot of people because there's like steps. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
whereas,
Or even you can copy.
yeah,
You can
yeah,
completely copy. Like people are like, buy it here. Here's the
right.
link.
Yeah,
Right. Whereas this is like you can't buy it. You
yeah.
gotta it.
You have to do
It
it.
truly is your own thing.
Yes,
It
it
is
is.
the unique expression of your own family because your adventures, even if you went to the same places as someone else every time, your experiences there are going to be different.
Yeah. and
Um,
and what everyone is able to do. I mean, even like financially, like that's different for every family, and that's changed for us as a family over the
yeah.
years. You know, and we've been able to do some different adventures now than we were able to do in the past. Um, this year I was able to take my kids. We actually were able to fly and to go places in different states, which was something that my kids didn't even get on a plane until they were 13 years old. Like that was the first time they flew. So
Yeah.
just people we're all at different places, but again, it doesn't mean your adventure wherever you're at for whatever limitation you feel like you have. It doesn't mean your adventures don't count. It just means you need to learn how to blossom where you are and not compare yourself to other people.
Yeah.
And that's a really important one.
Yes. It's your own family. It's your own family that you're building. You have some really. The book is so great, Greta.
Thanks.
I love the
You're
book.
so sweet.
I love the book. I really got so much out of it. Look, and I'm a book. I don't know. Do you write in your books? I
I
write in
do,
my
and I
books.
use tabs too. Like I
So,
also
I mean,
write
I've got. Look at
circle,
you.
star.
Oh,
Uh,
that's good. I mean, I wrote all through this book. There's so many. There's so many. I got so much out of it. But one of the things I thought was really neat was that you had practical tips at the end of each section,
that was
at the end of each chapter. You talk
that was
about.
important to me, but I
Yeah.
struggle with practical stuff. So I'm glad that it's in there and it worked for you.
There's really good ones. So I think it's a great book because you give all these jumping off points that still keep things unique. You talk about doling out candy, which I've totally done. So I'm glad you wrote about it in the book. When I would hike with our little kids, I always had suckers
Yeah, you
because
have to.
sometimes that's all you can do is
Yeah,
hand them a sucker and they're in your pack and they're screaming, and so you have a dum dum, and
yeah,
it changes.
totally.
So you talk about handing out jelly beans and M&Ms one at a time. You talk about playground stops on long trips. Um, you talk about starting small with well-marked trails. So I think it's hard to come up with, like you said, it's hard to come up with practical tips, but you did a really good job at it, and every chapter has them.
Thank you. I mean, I also it was hard for me because I didn't want to be like giving people like stuff that felt too basic, but But
It wasn't.
the wonderful part about writing a book is that you have this editor who reminds you um, to that you helps you have other remember that there are other people reading the book, and it's not, you're not writing it for yourself. And so
Yeah.
she's like, everybody's at a different spot than you. She's like, so you need to remember where you were when you first started and what would have helped you. And then I found that it was really fun to write those tips, because I wanted to be able to provide people in all different stages of the adventure with ideas. And I'm really glad that who is somebody who's, this is, you're pretty adept at this, for you to feel
But
excited
you know
about some
what?
of this stuff in there.
You even said in your book, there's always room for growth, you know, and so this made me think about a lot of different things. Like I mean, we've never done a surprise trip. You know, I mean, like not easy, but like I could be like, pack a bag, you
Yeah,
know, or give them a list. This is what you need. We're leaving in the
yeah,
morning. Or I mean,
yeah,
there were ideas in there that made me want to just jump right in. And so you know, and then even all the indoor ideas in the books. And um, so I love that that's at the end of every chapter. And you were really real. You say someone is always unhappy, tired, bored, hungry, sick, mad, grumpy, frustrated, or disappointed. As much as I want everyone happy all the time, it doesn't happen. I mean, I'm not happy all the time. So even to say that, like, I think if people adventure and they've got kids that are crying, like my kids cried for the
yeah,
first 10 years, someone cried at least once on every
yeah,
adventure. Then
totally.
they were okay. You know, I gave them a
Yeah,
sucker or
yeah,
whatever. I
yeah,
don't know. But you're always glad that you did it. Always.
yeah. And my kids are really good now at reminding me of the times when I was the one who was grumpy, crying, unhappy, whatever. They're like, you were so mad that one time, remember? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I do remember. You're right. And we can laugh about it now. Like, that's a really wonderful thing, because we can measure the growth. Like, you know, this mom has gotten better at handling this adventure. They've gotten better at it. Like, that's a measurable
Yeah.
growth of how
Yeah.
we are able to handle things going wrong or getting lost, or you know um
Yeah.
I mean, the cooler malfunctioning and all of our food getting spoiled, and how we
Yes.
handle that, those are all things that we can look back on and say, oh man, I remember that happened, and that was so hard. But now we can we can laugh about it, or we can talk about how we
We
handle it
grew.
better the next time. Like,
Yeah.
we can prepare for that.
Opportunities for growth. I loved that Frederick Douglass quote. If there is no struggle, there is no progress.
Yeah,
That's big. Can
yeah,
I tell you one story before we end, and then I'm
please
going to ask you
do.
one more story?
Okay.
We, the last, not even a year ago, like right after Christmas, there was this Airbnb that was brand new down in Tennessee. They like so it had openings over the holidays, and so we went down for like I mean it was like 3 days. You know, we leave early. We drive down to Tennessee. I think we were there for 3 days. We came right back home because then it was like New Year's and it was booked again. But this little Airbnb, and we did this hike with our kids called the Window Cliffs. And it looked cool. It was like these creek crossings, like 8 of them. And then you get to the Window Cliffs, which we didn't know what they were, but it was called the Window Cliffs and it sounded cool. So we start out on this hike, and it was a total disaster, Greta. It was like the creeks were like not creeks. They were super high. There was
Oh,
ropes that you had to hold on to cross, but the ropes were sometimes in really deep parts. It was the winter. It was
wow.
warm-ish, but it was like in the 50s. So we're crossing these creeks and like you're having to balance, and you got there and everyone's like no one's happy. Their feet are wet. There's like
Yeah,
8 to cross to get to the Window Cliffs and 8 to cross. It was just more treacherous than we were expecting
yeah.
and harder. And then we were on a time crunch because it said the gates were going to close at 5 o'clock
Oh,
in the
yeah.
evening. So all of a sudden we're rushing and we get to the Window Cliffs and they were so lame. It was like the pinnacle and it was just
Yeah,
nothing. It was nothing.
yeah.
I think it was rocks that maybe had an opening. We were like, what is this?
You're like,
And then we're having to
womp
rush.
womp.
Yeah, we're having to rush to get back to the beginning. And then the very end of it was like, you're basically like climbing straight up for like, I mean, you feel like you're gonna
Yeah. Oh,
die,
yeah.
but we talk about it all the time. all the time.
Yeah.
That's remember that hike? Remember that hike? I mean, the kids tell their friends about it, So, like you say in your book, you do these things, you take a risk, and it's worth it in whatever the ways, you know, whether it's you really loved it or it just becomes this story
Yeah.
and it made you grow, it's worth it. So,
And it bonded you together.
yes.
It
Yep.
creates connection because you had an experience together, and adventures really do connect us. So
Yeah.
even if it's just to laugh at what a waste of a hike it
Right.
was,
Why
it doesn't
wasn't there something
matter.
better at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you say, how do you do it? You just do it. You
Yeah.
do. And you lose your control and you just live.
Yeah.
And so, Greta, I just absolutely, I adore this book. I adore it. It's
Thank
called
you.
Adventuring Together by Greta Eskridge, How to Create Connections and Make Lasting Memories with Your Kids. If people want to find you, Greta, if they want to find more about your book, if they want to find more about you, and you have another book coming out real soon, where can people find you?
The easiest place to find me actually is on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. And you can search for me on Instagram by just looking up Greta Eskridge, or my handle is Ma and Pa Modern. Um, those are two easy ways to find me there. I also have a website and a blog where I post occasionally. I should do
I
it
get
more
that.
regularly, but you know how it is. And
Yep.
that's just gretaeskridge.com. And I travel and speak. So maybe one of these days I'll be in your neck of the woods. You can find my
Oh,
speaking schedule also on my Instagram account and on my blog. So gretaeskridge.com or Greta Eskridge on Instagram. And that's where I'll be. Come find me.
yeah. What's coming out in the spring?
My next book is called 100 Days of Adventure, and it's actually a book for kids and how they can adventure through in nature, activities outside, with art, cooking, books, just basically get them to engage in the real world. And there's lots of opportunities for them to invite their parents into the adventure, to invite their friends or their siblings, because again, the idea is to use the adventure as a tool for connection, because that's what I'm all about. I love connecting with people, and I love building relationships.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited about that. Kids are going to love it. I think kids are really drawn to the non-screen things,
I think so too.
because they know, their bodies know. Like,
Yeah.
this is what life is really all about. Well,
Yeah.
we'll be looking for that, and we always end with a favorite outdoor childhood memory of yours.
Mm. Oh gosh. Well, I think that one of my favorites was really simple. What just going on bike rides with my dad and my brother. He would take us to like some kind of back part of town, and where there was back roads, not a lot of traffic, so we could actually ride in the street, and we would explore new places. And for me, that was just the absolute best, because I loved being places that I had never been before, even if it was in my hometown. And so just going for a bike ride and exploring, feeling like I was, having a grand adventure. And I loved it.
I love these simple answers. It doesn't really take much, I think, to impress a child.
Yeah, it was
Go
doable.
somewhere new to bike ride, find a place where you can bike in the street,
Yeah,
you know. I mean, that's awesome.
yeah.
Well, Greta, thank you. Thanks so much for taking the time to be on. I cannot wait to share your book with everyone who hasn't read it yet. I was like a late bloomer here.
Hey,
I should
that's
have read
great.
it. I should have read it a while ago.
Uh,
But I so enjoyed it, and we're doing some of these things, and I can't wait. So
yay. I can't wait to hear about the surprise trip. I
yes.
owe my kids another one. We haven't done it for a while, so
Oh,
they
yeah.
gotta do it
I will
again.
definitely keep you in the loop because I'm
Yeah.
really excited to try that out. So thank you so much, Greta.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.